Good morning, Mr. Howie. We're ready for your opening remarks.
Good morning, Justice Wiggins, fellow members of the Commission.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to begin by giving you a sincere thank you. I cannot begin to imagine the amount of countless hours that each and every one of you have put into this process. And I certainly know that, that the state of Iowa and the members of the Supreme Court will be better for it. And so thank you very much. So, who am I and why am I here? I grew up in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, which is a small town in southeast Iowa in Henry County. Went through kindergarten through high school there, graduated high school in 1989. Went from there to Warper College in Waverly, Iowa. Graduated from there in 1993. Went from there immediately to the University of Iowa. Graduated from law school there in 1996. I've been practicing since 1996 when I was licensed to practice in the state of Iowa. Spent my first year clerking for the Iowa District Court in Burlington. And then I was privileged enough to join a private law firm in Des Moines in 1997. I've been in 1997 ever since. Our firm relocated to West Des Moines, and that's where we currently are. Now that tells you who am I, but it really doesn't tell you why I'm here. Why I'm here is in a way an offshoot of who I am, and what has kind of propelled me in my practice, and also propelled me as to why would I want this job in the first place. And with that, I want to take you back to 1989, the year that I graduated from high school and began my freshman year at Wartburg. Two historical events occurred that year that have profoundly affected me and how I've always pursued my interpretation of our government, of our Constitution, and why I do the things that I do with my clients and on a daily basis. Those two historical events that occurred that year was the massacre at Tiananmen Square in China. That was right before I graduated from high school. 1989, if you look for my resume, that's also the year that I turned 18 years old. That was the first opportunity I ever had to actually vote in an election. And I was watching on the news tens of thousands of individuals who were willing to lay down their lives for the simple opportunity to vote. Then that November, an incredible thing happened that I thought I would never see in my lifetime. The Berlin Wall came down. And that showed me that things can happen. People do make a difference. Now, I don't bring up those 2 points for their revolutionary nature. Rather, those 2 points allowed me to recognize and appreciate the system that we have here in this country. We have a federal constitution that is well over 200 years old, and yet during those 200 years, we have only amended it 27 times. Our federal government has survived a civil war, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, a Great Recession, and yet we're still here. The state of Iowa's constitution has been effective since 1857. Now, what does that mean? It means the system works. We're here because the system works, regardless of your position or your opinion of what happened in November 2010 with the judicial election. The fact is, it's in the Constitution, it's in the law, people voted, and 3 were removed, and now we're here. And we have 15 members, including a justice of the Supreme Court, including non-lawyers and lawyers that are going to help make that decision for the governor to put on the Supreme Court. Now that is what has kind of propelled me. Now what makes me a unique person as to why I could contribute to the Iowa Supreme Court? During my years of private practice, I have primarily focused on family law and appellate law. 2 areas that I believe will provide a unique perspective to the Iowa Supreme Court, and also which have been lacking in the Iowa Supreme Court in recent years. I just did a quick Westlaw search, and over all of the decisions that have been handed down by the Iowa Supreme Court and Iowa Court of Appeals over the past several years, well over 50% somehow impact the family, whether it be a juvenile case, a parental termination case, divorce case, or a paternity custody case. How more fundamental can you get in affecting an individual's lives than on the family law level? Yet, very few of the people that have gone on the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court have that type of family law background. Now, I have been specializing in family law basically for more than a decade, and that's due, I owe full credit to my partners on that particular circumstance. And I grew to love it. And as that, I became very active with the family law section of the Iowa State Bar Association. And during my time in this section, I was involved with the divorce subcommittee, where we would review legislation, also try to make the divorce more easier for people who are already going through a very traumatic period of their lives. And then also on top of that, I became vice chair and then eventually chair of the family law section. During my time as vice chair and chair, of course, all the people who participate in the family law section were from all over the state. I had the unique privilege of getting to speak with everybody and being able to learn, how do you do divorce up in northwest Iowa? How do you do it down in Ottumwa? How do you do it up in Dubuque? I was amazed at the diversity among the several judicial districts. And that experience has permitted me to appreciate greatly, on the most fundamental level, how law affects from a husband and wife to a parent and a child. And I want to be able to bring that type of perspective to the Iowa Supreme Court. Now, also what I do is I do a tremendous amount of appellate work. I have been, in other words, from beginning until ruling, well over 100 cases. And that appellate work, though primarily focused in family law area, has also been in several other areas. I've represented criminal defendants, I've done tort cases, I've done contract cases, real estate cases, I even did a tax sale case. And because of that appellate experience, I basically know the appellate rules backwards and forwards. And also, I think that's what would benefit the Supreme Court, as you have a practicing appellate attorney now becoming an Iowa Supreme Court justice. And so with my family law background, with my appellate background, and hopefully being able to see by my writing materials that I do know how to write, although that's always subject to debate, that I would like to bring those talents to the Iowa Supreme Court. And I really think that I could only benefit the Iowa Supreme Court in the fact that I believe the system works. It does work. And it works when you have the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the district court judges, the lawyers who practice in the whole area of the judicial branch, working case by case, client by client, to protect the rights and responsibilities of its citizens. Thank you very much for the time, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Mr. Howie, I have the first question for you. You talked about your Westlaw search, but I have the statistics from our Supreme Court here, and last year we did 4 terminations and 2 domestic relations not involving custody. The year before we did 0 terminations, 0 Chinas, and we did 0 Chinas this year, and 2 cases involving domestic relations not involving custody. I mean, you talk about 50%, but aren't you talking about the Court of Appeals, who handles a majority of the family law cases that come up in the appellate system?
Oh, absolutely. Most of these are decided by the Iowa Court of Appeals.
And don't you think, you make the case, you need a family law specialist, but don't you think those talents may be more appropriate for the Court of Appeals than the Supreme Court?
No, because I think what I would bring to the Iowa Supreme Court is that perspective that has been lacking on the Iowa Supreme Court recently, and the fact that for me, as one of the 7, I would certainly want the Iowa Supreme Court to take more family law cases and decide in that particular arena. I mean, when you're always faced with an applicant of the Iowa Supreme Court, you're either faced with a generalist or a specialist. Well, if you're a specialist, that means there are other areas of the law that you don't know about. My specialty is family law, and that perspective has been lacking on the Supreme Court. Now, I would have 6 colleagues on the Iowa Supreme Court, and I would depend upon them to help me through any type of case and to research and write, and also to rely on their expertise. But my point is, Justice Wiggins, is that that particular area has been missing from the Supreme Court lately.
Thank you. Any questions from left side of the table here? Ms. Gogerson.
Good morning, Mr. Howie.
Good morning.
And in the interest of full disclosure, when you were vice chair of the family law section, who was the chair?
You were.
Thank you.
And a fine chair you were.
Oh, thank you. I guess I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. Number one, during your time as chair of the Family Law Section, your development of a new family law manual for the Bar Association and how that's being utilized throughout the state. And second, it seems that mandatory mediation is coming down the pipe statewide in terms of domestic relations cases, and the Supreme Court, to a certain extent, may have some influence in how mediation becomes mandatory statewide. And I was just wondering if you could comment on whether or not you feel that a particular model of mediation should be mandated statewide, or whether districts should be able to decide on their own what model they choose to use.
To answer the first question first, regarding the Iowa Family Law Manual, yeah, it was my privilege to take the Family Law Manual. It had not been redrafted, it had not been updated for 10 years when I basically rewrote the thing in 2008, and is currently published by the Iowa State Bar Association, and is available online for bar members to bring to download and hopefully use. Basically, when I was writing the Family Law Manual, I wanted it to focus on what's the black letter law of family law in Iowa, and that's what I did, and I'm very happy of the work that I did. I need to update it, though. It's been since 2008. Now, regarding mediation, that's a very good point. I am a staunch advocate of mediation. I think mediation not only alleviates the stress on the judicial branch, and by clearing out cases that should be cleared out. In terms of what I've learned through the divorce process, custody process, very heated, very high emotional cases, that most of the time people can't reach a resolution because they simply do not communicate. Mediation provides an outstanding opportunity for those people to get together and also to have them some control over their own destiny. Now, mediation, whether that should be imposed statewide. Now, as I said, I'm a huge advocate, and it's done in Polk County. It just recently got expanded to a few counties near around Polk, and I believe it's active in the 6th Judicial District. The greatest problem imposing that on a statewide basis is the lack of mediators. Are we going to have a mediator up in Emmett County? Are we going to have mediators up in Allamakee? And we've got to make sure that we have the mediators in place that can go up there before we would ever impose that on a statewide basis. But I think it can provide an invaluable service.
Any other questions? Mr. Holm?
Thank you, Justice Wiggins, and thank you for your application. As you know, a lot of what the Supreme Court does involves making administrative decisions as to the operation of the judicial system. Like you, I'm in private practice, so I know that there's administration involved in that every day. But I wonder if you could tell us about your experience handling administration and what strengths you think you'd bring in that area to the court.
Well, certainly, with any type of court order that gets handed down or anything that is expected to be followed by the peoples involved with the case, you've got to have the ability to implement it, and that is the administrative aspect to it. As you pointed out, I'm a member of a private law firm, and so that on that small level, we still have decisions that we've got to make every day. We've got to make sure that, is the money coming in the door? Do we have enough money to keep the lights on, to pay the staff? I mean, as a part owner of that law firm, I'm the last person to get paid. Everything else gets paid before I do. And what I would like to do is bring that is that you've got to have a balanced budget. You've got to have the administration that's there, and sometimes you have to make difficult choices. You've got to make hard choices. And I would like to bring that private practice level to the Supreme Court.
Ms. Williams, I think you had your hand up.
Good morning. Thank
Good
you
morning.
for taking part in this process. Could you tell me what you think would be your biggest challenge if you are appointed to the Supreme Court?
Well, I think the biggest challenge facing the Supreme Court, at least right now, and all you have to do is open up the paper, is the budgetary aspect to it. And this is kind of a follow-up to Mr. Holmes' question. I think because of the budgetary circumstances of what the Supreme Court, what the judicial branch, what the entire state of Iowa's government is facing, that's going to be very, very difficult. And, I would approach it with an open mind, consider all the options before having to make decisions. So I predict that's probably going to be the most difficult part.
Any other questions down this way? We'll get back to Mr. Cook probably. Any questions on this side? Seeing none, I guess I have a question. You talk about, you know, you're a family law specialist, so those are the cases you might read. Are there any cases in recent years that the Supreme Court viewed good, bad, or indifferent? Disagree with is what I'm really looking for. And not because you lost.
No,
I always disagreed with those.
I thought Mr. Howie always won.
not all the time. Which is actually the difficult part. The hardest part is calling my client and telling them that we didn't win. Well, I mean, I read everything that you guys write, and
And you don't have to limit to family law.
okay. There was, I mean, one particular decision, which I am certainly no expert on, but I did disagree with the Supreme Court on. That was Racy versus Fitzgerald, which was the slot machine versus the steamboat versus the Prairie Meadows case. I mean, I happen to agree with Justice Cady's dissent in that particular case.
Mr. Pace.
Good morning, Mr. Howie.
Good morning.
When we visited, I remember you saying that you got appeal referrals from different folks around the state. Can you just speak to where those appeals are coming from and whether you're out in different counties around the state, or are you primarily here in Des Moines and around Des Moines?
Well, I'm very pleased with my contacts through the State Bar Association, as well as the times that I've spoken at seminars, that people who don't do appeals have been calling me from all over. I get appeals from Sioux City, Council Bluffs. The one I included in my writing materials, that was from Alameda County and Waukon. I've gotten appeals from Dubuque, Waterloo. I just got a brand new appeal from Esterville. And another one of my appeals that I received as a referral from the trial attorney came from Burlington, my home county down there. And it's been an honor, the fact that so many people think of me when they've got an appeal. They think, all right, I really don't know what I'm doing, but you know what, this Howie guy, I think he knows how to do certain things, and so he's referred to him, and I talk to him. And I talk to the clients about the process and how difficult it can be and how much it is. And after I've informed them of it, then they decide whether they're going to appeal or not. More often than not, unfortunately, for my bottom line, I recommend to the clients that they should not appeal because of the length of the process, because of the cost involved. But yeah, it's been wonderful getting those referrals from all over the state.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Ms. Dixon?
Good morning, Mr. Howie.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you again. Could you just speak briefly to the issue of collegiality, getting along with others?
Well, if you knew my law firm and the different personalities associated with our small law firm, you have to have collegiality. And I say that with all due respect and the fact that I love all the partners that I currently practice with. But we definitely have different viewpoints on certain things. And also it's kind of represents a microcosm. I wouldn't dare compare our shareholder meetings with what goes on with the Supreme Court, but balancing those different personalities has always been an art rather than a science. And what I've learned through that is simply listening and then making the best judgment after hearing all sides.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Sir, I saw here with interest in your application that you disclosed to us that since you were 11 years old, you participated in community theater productions. Yeah. Why did you reveal that to us, and what do you think it adds? What do you think it adds to your application, if anything?
Well, it adds to my application the fact that community theater growing up was exceedingly important to me and my family. I was raised by my dad, and one of the things that he did is he got us involved in community theater performances, which I did in high school, I did in college, and just having the camaraderie of the fellow cast and doing the incredible hard work. We were doing, my very first show was Fiddler on the Roof when I was in 5th grade, and we were working every night. So I was going to school all day and then working at night, and ever since then, it's presented to me that work is excellent but can also be fun. My biggest regret is the fact that I've not done a community theater performance since 1998, which was at the Des Moines Playhouse, and that's just simply because the demands of work and family have just overtaken that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we appreciate your application and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.